This session is brought to you by Campbell Rinker. For nearly 30 years, Campbell Rinker has researched the opinions, attitudes, and motivational habits of nonprofit donors, including their perceptions of library philanthropy for the 2020 International Public Library Fundraising Conference. To read recent survey insights or learn more about how Campbell Rinker can serve you, visit campbellrinker.com.
Hello and welcome to today's session. I am pleased to be here with Shawn Bakker from the Nashville Public Library Foundation and Liz Reeves from the St. Louis Public Library Foundation. First, Liz will share not just filling seats, a key to establishing strong board leadership, and then Shawn will share setting up your board and committees for success. After that, we'll have time for Q&A. Let me tell you a little more about our speakers. Liz Reeves is the director of the St. Louis Public Library Foundation. In her 19 years of fundraising, she has spent 12 years at St. Louis Public Library, and she has grown their membership program, restructured their endowment, initiated a planned giving program, and managed a $20 million campaign in support of St. Louis's Central Library. And then Shawn Bakker has been the president of the Nashville Public Library Foundation since 2017. She has 20 years of experience in nonprofit leadership, development, and communications. Shawn has a certificate in fundraising from NYU and is a certified fundraising executive. And with that, Liz, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Christina. I am the director of St. Louis Public Library Foundation. A little history, St. Louis Public Library was established in 1865, and St. Louis Public Library Foundation was established in 1989 and restructured again in 2004. More recently, in 2016, our foundation staff have been made library staff, even though we're a separate 501c3. It has integrated the foundation more with the library and been a really beneficial arrangement since 2016. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about board development, and in particular, how do you identify, recruit, and secure board members and set them up for success with your organization. A lot of times I have talked with other nonprofit leaders in the library world and other sectors, and I often hear misconceptions regarding board development. One being, if you are able to have 30 people on your board of directors, that you need to have every one of those seats filled all the time. Often that leads to compromising with who you might put on that board, and not always the best arrangement. I also hear from people a lot that when someone volunteers to give their time, their talent, their treasure to serve your board and your organization, that they're doing you this big, big favor and you don't have anything to offer them back, that they're not getting something as well. Want to move on to the next slide. And I find that that's just not true, that we have a lot to offer, that public libraries are amazing institutions. We can move on to the next slide. We as an organization offer a board volunteer that pride and satisfaction of supporting their community. Public libraries appeal to so many people. We serve everyone, all ages, all ethnicities, that when a board volunteer does get to work with us, they get so much in return. Not only that pride and satisfaction, if they are a professional, maybe their company requires that they serve on boards for community service. So you're helping people with their careers. If they're a young professional, it's a wonderful opportunity for them to add to their resume. And for everyone who serves on your board, they get access to a whole group of people they may not otherwise get to interact with in their other networks. Let's move on. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship. And when you're looking to identify people who will be a good fit for your board, I think of it like businesses do, that you're looking for a good hire. And what I mean by that is identifying individuals who have the strengths, the skills, the attitude, and the ability to make the commitment and that they align with your organization, its mission, and the role a board trustee plays in the success of your organization. Now, I put this picture up because this is a board member of ours, and I think of him as the ultimate good hire. He is a perfect fit for our organization. You wouldn't know it to look at him in this particular picture, but this person is in the financial sector. He is a whiz with numbers. He is a financial advisor, and he is passionate about the library. I walked into our central library one day on another errand, and I did a double take, and I saw him over there scrubbing this huge printer. One of the things this board member loves about the library is that it brings people together. He loves the exhibits that we do. And we were preparing for an exhibit last year called Print to Pixels, a history of the written word and how it impacted the world. And this was a historic old printer, was in a warehouse fire. And this board member had been down there, asked if he could help clean it, and kept coming down day after day to scrub that printer. It got it up and running and working, and it was part of the exhibit. This gentleman just exhibits the perfect board member. All of his strengths help support our organization. He has such a great attitude. He had the time to commit to us, totally aligned with us. Let's move on. So now that you know what you need, you work with your nominating committee or your board development committee to outline those responsibilities and expectations that you're going to have for anybody who serves on your board. You're going to look at commitment, the time that they're going to have to put in for committee meetings, board meetings, coming to events. Moving on. You're also going to look at the governance responsibilities, fiduciary responsibilities, oversight. Moving on. Also looking at stakeholder identification, recruitment, and engagement. And finally, the financial commitment. Moving on. What personal contribution you're going to ask of your board members. In our case, we ask that they become a leadership donor, that they commit to making a major gift during their time serving on the board, that they make the library a top philanthropic priority. And if they are aligned or connected to a company or a business, that they help shepherd a gift request. I'll share with you the document that we use for responsibilities and expectations that we share with board members. Okay, moving on. So now you know what you want out of a board member. How do you identify them? How do you find them? And this is an ongoing process. You never get to a point where you can say, all right, we've got the board done. Always changing. Board members come on, go off because of term limits or changes in their own life and their availability. So you're always looking for new people to bring in, new people to engage to serve on your board. With our nominating committee, we sit down, we look at the existing board, and we look at where the gaps are. We're always looking to make sure that we have as diverse a board as possible. And I mean that in every sense of the word. Diversity in age, gender, ethnicity, the sector they represent in their work, if they are a community volunteer, making sure that we're not just bringing on a group of friends, that we're really looking to engage as broad a group as possible. And once we've figured that out, and we have a list of people that we seriously want to consider, we next look at how we can engage them. Moving on. Also, you never know when you're going to meet a new board member. I've met new board members at events when they're a guest of an existing board member or a donor. Sometimes it's a donor I've just gotten to know better and I realize they really would be a good fit. I have had several board members come to us through our events. So much so that when we're thinking about who our event chair should be for the next gala, we also think about who might be able to step into a leadership role as well. When we engage them in that role as an event chair or on an event committee, they're able to get to know us better as an organization. They learn more about the library and the foundation and the different programs we support. And it's amazing, those individuals who really connect, you'll see that. You'll see that as you go through that process of event planning. And sometimes you'll identify a potential board member who's a volunteer at the library. And when we've got that group, that list of people through our nominating committee, as we've discussed all the gaps and who might be able to fill those gaps, and we're ready to go talk to them, moving on, we look for that person who can make that connection. And we're very thoughtful about how we engage them. Who should that person be? Is it someone who they're known to somebody on our board already? Or it should be the nominating chair if we don't have that real direct connection with another board member. And we just gauge interest. We ask, you know, if they might consider it. Come down to the library. Let's go on a tour. Let's have lunch. Let's talk about why I am involved with the library. Be very thoughtful in that engagement. And then next, if there is some interest, that's when I would send that board responsibilities and expectations document. It's very clear what we expect, the real-time commitment, everything that we need our board members to do. And if that person is still interested and wants to learn more, then take them to lunch, bring them down for a meeting, make it official, have the head of your nominating committee there, the head of your board there. If the library director can join you, even better. This is serious, this is important, and they deserve that attention. You're asking a lot of them, and you're asking them to take that leadership role. So do it right, make it formal and make that request. And then let them take their time to get back to you. If they say yes, that's great. You'll report that back to your nominating committee, bring their name forward at the next board meeting for election. If they say no thanks, that's not the end of the world. They still are interested in your organization. They're still a valued person to keep engaged with your organization. So maybe they could help serve on an event committee or another committee, maybe bring people down to the library for a tour to get to know the library better. There are a lot of ways to keep someone engaged. And just because they're not able to take on the commitment now doesn't mean they might not be interested a year from now. More often than not, when someone turns us down, it's usually because they don't have the time. Either they're very busy in their work or with family, or they're already serving on too many boards and just can't do the job right for you. But keep them on that list, keep them available, keep them engaged, and they may be a great board member in the future. Moving on. So now that they've been elected to your board, what do? Well, for us, we hold a new trustee orientation. And we did our first orientation last year. And the reason being, we had 1/3 of our board, 9 people, rotate off because of term limits last year. And we knew it was coming. Most of those individuals joined our board ahead of our first large capital campaign about 10 years back. And so they all joined about the same time, and they were all due to rotate off at the same time. And I challenged them and those on our nominating committee to help us find replacements that were as wonderful as they were. But we had this huge influx of new trustees. And it just made sense that we needed to give them the tools so they could be successful in their role with us. They were elected by the board at our annual meeting, which is held in September. Our next board meeting wasn't until December. And so we held our orientation in October. And I sent them, I was told I need to hand this, a binder full of all sorts of information that they could reference, read ahead of this orientation, so they could come with their questions, so that they could have this to bring to board meetings to plug in other information they got. And I'll share with you a table of contents of what's included in that. But I put in information about the library, the history of the library, the organizational chart, the current library governing board list. And then I put in information about the foundation, our board, our history, a mission, financials, past board minutes from the last 3 meetings, and then timely materials as well, whether it was pamphlets or brochures about programs we supported, or if we had an event coming up, I put an invitation in there, a couple friends brochures, and then asked them to bring this to our orientation. And the orientation was led by the chair of our nominating committee, because that individual led the recruitment of all our new trustees. We had that person there, the chair of our board, myself, and then the library director dropped in as well. And we invited new trustees, but because we hadn't ever held an orientation before, I also opened it up to anyone serving on the board who wanted to attend. And I invited the library governing board as well. And the president, vice president of the library governing board attended, which was wonderful. They got a better understanding of what we did and what we supported. They thought they had that down pat, but they learned a lot of new information as well. So it was really beneficial. And my board, the individuals serving on my board prefer morning meetings. And I didn't want to plan an orientation that was an all-day event, not like a retreat. It was meant to be something that would fit in their schedule so that everyone could attend. And we made it a breakfast, you know, hired a caterer, had a nice breakfast buffet brought in, and made that first half hour or so social, get to know people, talk. It's very casual. It's not meant to be a formal, structured event. It was really a get to know you, and we want to make sure that each person is set up to do their job well so that they could hit that first board meeting feeling confident and able to participate right away. So we held a breakfast. We went over the materials that I had sent out, explained the financials, explained the different committees and ways they could participate, went over ways they could help in the fundraising effort. And then we split them into 2 groups and gave them a prompt, a scenario for fundraising, and had them brainstorm and discuss how they would be able to support that effort. And then we came back together and talked about it and discussed new ways. And we did a little get to know you and thanked everyone. And then before sending them on their way, we gave them a challenge before the next board meeting. Bring someone down to the library, get a new Tennessee Williams Society donor. If we had an event coming up, invite somebody to attend the event. Things that were easy to be successful with, things that they could do right away to feel involved and jump right in. And then at that first board meeting, when we introduced all the new trustees to everyone, the head of the nominating committee was able to report, you know, so-and-so brought, you know, people to this event, or you brought them down for a tour. They're already out in the community working for us. And they started off their service with us in a very positive, meaningful, tangible way. And I found it was really, really helpful on a lot of levels to have an orientation, and we'll continue doing those as we go along. And now that I've talked about what to do to identify and recruit and secure a board member and give them the tools to be successful, Shawn's going to talk to you about how you keep your board members engaged.
Thank you, Liz. Liz has talked about the importance of communicating the board expectations to potential board members before they agree to do the job. In addition to the governance responsibilities that is expected of nonprofit board members, the primary purpose of our organization is to raise money for the library. To this end, board members are expected to give personally. And so we're going to just talk through what that means for the Nashville Public Library Foundation. For us, we ask that our board members consider being a Carnegie Society member, and this is a commitment of $1,500 annually. I know that the St. Louis Public Library Foundation also asks that their trustees make a major gift that is personally significant to them, that they may pay out over a couple of years. When they make a gift, they commit to making the Seattle or the St. Louis Public Library Foundation one of their top 3 philanthropic priorities. We ask our board members to also consider making a planned gift. Secondly, we ask that our board members advocate for the support of the foundation and the library. This includes making connections and securing contributions from other libraries, from others to the Library Foundation. And we ask that our board members introduce 5 new individuals or corporations to the foundation annually. This allows us to get the names of prospects and people who may be interested. The board member may want to invite them down for a tour. And depending on the level of comfort that the board member has, once they bring them down, we are able to make the specific fundraising ask if they are more comfortable. But we want them to be able to introduce us. Next, we also ask, as a part of the advocacy, we ask that our board members advocate for the public support. So it's not just the private philanthropic support, but we recognize that our library needs both the public and the private support. So we want our board members to be aware of who the council members are so that they can advocate for the public support also. I have a full listing of our board responsibilities that are added to the online portal, and I know that's the same of the St. Louis Library Foundation's board responsibilities. So if you want to go through and see the specifics, feel free to reference the portal. Next, I want to actually spend some time talking through our board committees, and you see them listed there. We have 5 board committees that meet throughout the year. And each board member is asked to serve on at least one committee. The chairs of each committee are also on the executive committee. So additionally, we have 1 to 2 prior board members that continue to serve on a committee even after their board term is over. And we have found this to be really helpful for continuity, but also just for the historical perspective of the work that the committee has done in the past. And then each committee has assigned responsibilities as well as elements of our strategic plan that guide the frequency and the agendas of each of their meetings. So first, we're going to talk about our executive committee. The executive committee is made up of chairs of each of our committees, as well as our officers of the board. And so the executive committee meets bi-monthly, and they meet on alternating months of our board meeting. It was that our executive committee was traditionally a mini board meeting. And so kind of what that meant is we just had committee reports out, and it's felt really like our board meeting. And so for those who were on executive committee, once they attended the executive committee, the board meeting felt pretty redundant for them. So we shifted and we made our executive committee more of an opportunity for brainstorming and informal conversation. Oftentimes I'll bring an agenda item to that committee and to that meeting, and that will allow us to just have conversation and hear the perspective of the chairs of the different committees for us to be able to figure out how do we want to handle this. And it's a chance for me to get their expertise and also some of their input and guidance. As well, we oftentimes have committee chairs who will bring specific recommendations in terms of topics. Next slide. Our board development committee is our nominating committee. They play several hats, but one is they work year-round to identify and cultivate prospective board members. Also, they are responsible for onboarding of our new board members as well as ongoing board training throughout the year. And I know Liz talked about her board development committee helping to lead that onboarding training for those new members. We do something similar with ours. And then we also ask the board development, they do a survey with our board members to find out what additional training do our board members feel like they would want throughout the year. As a part of our strategic plan, this committee will also explore tools for board member accountability. So this is a new thing for us. And this past year, we've had multiple board members who want some kind of a report card or a checklist of commitments. And they say, can you just tell me halfway throughout the year, how am I doing? We have that board list of responsibilities that they all agree to, but they want to just know, have I done what I'm supposed to do? And so sometimes what that means is, as I mentioned, we expect our board members to bring 5 people for a tour or introduce us to 5 different corporations. And so what we will do midway throughout the year is say, here's where you are. You brought 2 people in, and that gives them an opportunity to help to maybe refocus or reprioritize their work with the foundation. Our next committee is our finance committee. And next slide, please. The finance committee is responsible for approving the budget and reviewing our investments. And a few years ago, our finance committee also spent some significant time and helped to outline a financial sustainability plan, which this went for the next 5 years. And so what that outlines is, what are we expecting to raise? How much are we expecting to give to the library? And then are we going to put any funds into an endowment or any other long-term account? That has been really helpful because it's allowed the library to do their planning. They essentially know how much they can expect to receive from the foundation over the next couple years. However, all the best laid plans changed, as many of you probably also experienced with COVID-19. So while we have a financial sustainability plan, and it is our hope that we will be able to keep to that plan, this is the first time our budget is on a July 1 fiscal year. And this is the first time that, as a part of the budget process, we have developed a contingency budget. And the finance committee has led that process. And that has been just an opportunity for us to be able to be responsive to the potential changing fundraising landscape. And so we will not be guaranteeing the library full funding at the start of the year, but instead the finance committee passed the budget that is in line with the financial sustainability plan, but also added a potential 10% contingency reduction based on where the fundraising is coming in. And I'm grateful in this uncertain time to truly have a finance committee who's understands the potential challenges, but then is also able to help us work through this. So we are not using all of our reserves to fund the library this year, but we're really looking at it for a long-term, kind of a long-term investment in the library. Our next committee is our Fund Development Committee, and this committee takes a more thorough dive into the various vehicles of fundraising. So they focus on our annual fundraising, our event fundraising, our major donor, community and corporate fundraising. This year, as a part of our strategic plan, the Fund Development Committee is leading the charge to have us analyze how we're fundraising and the emphasis that the staff should place on each of these different categories. So we want some guidance, and this is what we're going to be exploring this year, is how much time should we be spending on some of the long-term sustainable aspects of supporting the library. So on our endowment or our planned giving, how much time should we be spending on funding new programs? And should we consider funding a new program every year? And then where does that fit with just sustaining the fundraising for the existing programs? The other piece now that we have merged with Friends is advocacy, and wanting to determine as a staff, how much time should be spent advocating for the public dollars. That doesn't necessarily directly correlate to funds that the library or that the foundation is raising to give to the library, but instead it translates to bottom line support for the library. So our Fund Development Committee helps provide guidance and direction for all of those various things. And lastly is our Program Committee. Our Program Committee was our newest formed committee, and it was created just a few years ago. And honestly, when it was created, there was a little concern if this should be the foundation's role. And that's partly because the library is the experts in programs, and the library really is leading our efforts in which programs is the library working on. What we have found, though, is that it's important for the foundation to have a say in these are programs we can raise money for. There is community interest in supporting these programs. And so we have a board member that is assigned to each of the main programs that the foundation supports. And the assigned program manager meets with this board member, and the board member also usually attends at least 2 of the programs. The board member is responsible then for providing other board members with opportunities to engage in that particular program. And then they are also responsible in cultivating support and revenue for that specific program. Oftentimes we put our new board members on this committee, and this allows them to become more familiar with some of the work that we're supporting by allowing them to just dig in a little bit deeper to the specific programs. So that's an overview of how our committees are put together. And now I want to just talk about the structuring of our committee meetings. And just last week, I spent probably 10 hours just looking at our committees and our structure, the committee objectives, as well as what our meeting plan is going to be for our next fiscal year. And so I was looking at what do each of the committees need to accomplish, and then when do they need to accomplish it. And so to figure out what the communities need to accomplish was really looking at our strategic plan and what is that committee's responsibility in the strategic plan. Was also looking at fundraising for big events. When does that need to take place? When do we want to present a new plan to the board, and whether that's the budget for the next year, whether that's our diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. How do we time all of this out so it goes through the proper committee process and then gets to the board at the right time? So an example of that is when we're looking at the budget. We know that the budget is going to start with the finance committee, then it will go to the executive committee, and then it will go to the board. And so on my plan, I've just marked out, if we need our budget approved by the May board meeting, when does it need to come to the finance committee? And so what that means is right now I have a full outline of our committee meetings and the objectives of each meeting for the entire year. And it's really helpful, especially when we get in kind of the groove of the year, just to be able to say, okay, you know, next month at this meeting, let me see what we need to accomplish. And it's all mapped out. Of course, life happens and things have to be adjusted and things have to be changed, but it's just nice to start off the year with a plan. And then it also allows the committee chairs just to see what their responsibility is throughout the whole year. Then when the board members start the year, they receive a calendar invite from us for the meetings of the entire year. And this allows them just to prioritize their schedule and make sure that they can have good attendance at the board meetings as well as the committee meetings. So as both Liz and I have talked about, you're probably feeling like investing in the board definitely takes a lot of time. But what we can both assure you that when you have the right people on the board who understand the expectations, and then you have a plan for their work throughout the year, you are truly set up for success.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. And thank you to Liz and Shawn both for that wonderful presentation. We have quite a few questions for you, so that we're going to kind of dive right in. Everybody should be able to now see both Liz and Shawn, and hopefully their sound is all working.
Hi.
Okay. So I'm just going to dive right into some of these questions. We have about 20 minutes left. Okay, the first one is, do you run your board orientation every time a new member joins, or annually or what? I suppose that depends on whether you bring people on in a rolling fashion or as a cohort.
We tend to bring people on throughout the year. And we just started this process, but I plan to hold it every year because what I learned the first time is some people can't make it. And it's a great opportunity to use it as a refresher course for those board members who maybe haven't been paying attention to your communications about what you're doing. And it was really beneficial to invite the library board leadership, the library board, the governing board, as well as library leadership. In St. Louis Public Library, we call it Library Council, but it's our top administration. And a couple of them have expressed interest in attending and learning more in depth about the foundation's work. So I'll hold it every year.
Okay, let's see. Our foundation will be leading the charge for our capital campaign, and current leadership is not the right fit for this role. Suggestions for moving them to a different role?
We just went through a capital campaign, and I saw a couple of responses on the app, and I agree, finding a campaign chair, or in our case, 2 chairs. But we found that it was really important to have them be on the board as well, and that was their role when they first came on the board. But it's difficult for anyone to go to a potential capital donor, ask for a large gift if they're not committed to the project themselves. And so it was really important for us to choose those 2 campaign chairs who were able to commit to the capital campaign as well. And then we too put together a campaign committee of people, combination, people who were on the board and who were community volunteers.
Okay. Shawn, just so you know, we moved over really quickly. If you want to touch on this, our foundation will be leading the charge for our capital campaign, and current leadership is not the right fit for this role. Suggestions for moving them to a different role, if you have anything to add there.
in terms of our board orientation, we do a orientation once a year. And so we have all of our board members who are new to the board that year participate in the orientation. And we don't bring new board members on throughout the year. We only bring new board members on kind of one time a year. So it's easy for them all to participate in that same orientation. This year we're doing it in two parts. The first part is really the nuts and bolts about the foundation. And the second part is more focused on the library. We do a tour of the library. We bring in the library director. So it's kind of a two-part orientation. In terms of the capital campaign, I think the question was just if you don't have the right people that are currently on the board.
Yes, that's right.
We have, for one of our for our most recent capital campaign, we had a board member chair it, but we also allowed for people not on the board to participate. And that was a nice way of broadening beyond just those people who are on the board if they're not the right people to help direct. And so I think that would be the only kind of piece of advice that I would have is look beyond your board when you're entering into new opportunities. Specifically, our board has focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and in our strategic plan a couple months ago, but recognizing we need to bring outside people outside of our board to join us for this. And so I think we are never hesitant to involve non-board members in our work.
Thank you, Shawn. Okay, the next question is, our foundation will be leading the I just read that one. What continuing education do you do with the boards?
Well, I'll go first. Right now, we aren't doing as much as we probably should. We don't do a lot of continuing ed. I give them opportunities. I let them know of things like this conference, encourage them to participate, but so far, not a lot of activity there, but I could see where we would need more of that.
Thank you.
I had mentioned our strategic plan, and this is one thing that we have prioritized is our board education. We have just started our strategic plan. So kind of our first step of this is reaching out to our board with a survey and just getting their feedback on what type of information would be most helpful for them, whether that is board specifics on fundraising, how to make the ask, if they want more information on just what it takes to be a good board member, or also other options, as I mentioned, the diversity, equity, inclusion, bringing in a facilitator to help us prioritize that and just make sure that as a foundation, the board members are well educated so they can help guide and lead the foundation in that. But for us, it's really going to start with the survey.
Okay, great. And next question is, let's see. Oh, we had one that had a few replies already in the chat, but one is, what is the average size of the library foundation board? And it seems as though it's typically around the 12 to 15 mark, at least from some of these answers. But if you ladies want to go ahead.
Ours is actually quite a bit larger. We're at 30. And that is sometimes feels to be a bit large. However, when we are trying to make sure that we're representing the various sectors of the community that we serve, and when we're wanting them to be focused on fundraising, we have found that a larger board, specifically because of the fundraising focus, has been important.
We too have up to 30. And we don't always have 30, but we tend to hover in that 25 zone. A couple of our board members are from the governing board, but 25 for us tends to work really well.
Okay. This is an interesting one for the times. Any tips for holding board meetings virtually during the pandemic? Or maybe you guys have postponed them.
No, we've held, we had one in March. We meet quarterly, and we had one in June. And one thing we did learn is that we contact everybody ahead of time, make sure the technical works for them, that they're able to sign on comfortably, that they're familiar with the technology. And then the first thing our board chair does as soon as the meeting starts is everyone needs to mute. I will call roll call. You only unmute when you need to answer. After every segment of information or reporting, we always pause and say, does anyone have any comments or questions? We wait, people raise their hand, unmute, they're called on, kind of like school. But that structure is so important in order for people to be heard, to get information. I've had suggestions made to me that I need to send, strong coffee to their homes in the morning. We meet at 8 a.m. and maybe pastries, but we haven't gone that far yet.
That's great. The only other thing I would add, Liz, those are great suggestions. We too have continued with our meetings. I have found that sometimes for those board members that are more comfortable with the technology, they use the chat feature, which is also kind of a nice way just to hear people's, oftentimes it's just affirmations, something that doesn't need to be kind of stop the whole meeting to hear, but it's just a chance for people to weigh in when it doesn't necessarily require everybody stopping to turn to that person. And we've tested the technology with those who are less comfortable prior to the meeting. Board meetings that we've had, we have had the best attendance and the best participation. I think people are not traveling or had not been traveling, and just the lack of needing to come to the library for a meeting, it has made people, it's kind of respected people's time. And so even going forward, some board members have asked if once we are able to gather again, if there's some of our committee meetings and that we would still consider handling via Zoom call, just because of the convenience of it and the participation.
Sure. And kind of following that a little bit, still related to the pandemic, would you be willing to share your financial stability plan pre-COVID?
I'm more than happy. I'll just quickly talk about it, and then if anybody, if someone wants to send me an email, I'd be happy to email it to them. But we had come out of a comprehensive capital campaign in which, prior to the campaign, we were giving the library $1 million a year. In the midst of the campaign, because it was such a successful campaign, we jumped to giving the library $2.5 million every year. But what that meant is once the campaign fundraising was over, the library had grown to expect $2.5 million a year, and we couldn't go back to some of those large donors. They were still paying on pledges and asked for them to make another large gift. And so if we did not put together a financial sustainability plan, we would have run out of money within a couple years. And so the purpose of that financial sustainability plan was really to kind of come back. We pulled back slightly to around just 2.2 million of what we're giving the library, but we obviously then also increased our annual giving. And so part of that financial sustainability plan was over several years, we will be giving the library less than what we had been the previous year. And now we just reached a point, and then, like I said, COVID has happened. But we just reached the point where we're starting to be able to increase again the amount that we're giving to the library. But again, if someone, feel free, I would be happy to email you what that specific plan has been.
Liz, did you have anything to add?
We have spending policies and structures in place for, our setting our fundraising goals and what we'll support and how we'll support that going forward. I don't really have it tied up in a nice plan though, so I'm not sure I could contribute to that.
Okay. The next question is, how big is your foundation staff?
Not big enough. We have 4 people, and of the 4, and we're technically library staff. We were moved over to library staff, and there are a lot of benefits to that. But you have myself as the director of the foundation. I have a development manager, a communications coordinator, and a development associate. And the development associate is primarily admin support and manages our database and gift fulfillment. And then our communications person, and really you have 2 full-time fundraisers on staff. We're very fortunate that we work with the library's departments, like our marketing department. Our CFO is the library CFO, the business office, all of that we have access to. But as far as fundraisers, we have 2 full-time fundraisers and 2 support people.
And how about you, Shawn?
We actually have a staff of 9 that equates to 5 FTE, just because we have a fair amount of staff who are not full-time. Of those, the majority are fundraising focused.
Okay. And we actually, right now we only have one more question. So if anybody else has anything to add, please do. But our last question is, do either of you use a consent agenda with your board? We are thinking of trying it to encourage better involvement. And we did have one response from Dawn, who presented yesterday, and she said we use a consent agenda for board committee reports, resolutions, and distributions to the library, and that saves them a lot of time to devote to strategic questions since they only meet for 90 minutes quarterly.
We do not. Liz, I'm not sure if you do, but we have never operated that way.
We do not either. And we meet quarterly for 90 minutes as well. So maybe it's something I need to look into.
Yes, and if anybody needs to expand on that, it looks like Dawn has been doing that. So perhaps she'll have a virtual meetup or something similar so that everybody can chat about how that's working. Okay, let's see. I'm going to check really quickly if there's anything else. It looks like we got to everything. So that's fantastic. So I'm going to let everybody go just a couple of minutes early. I just want to kind of thank you both so much for your time, for your great presentation, and very thorough responses to all of the questions that were live today. And I just want to thank you both again so much for your time.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the conference, everybody.